Hello there guys, it's Joey and this is a video for the Simply Starry Smudge Temple of the Dead, which was a request. It was requested that I create a smudge and we're going to talk a little bit about that, and it was requested that I make a video for it. So we're going to use the video to talk a little bit about some matters around and questions that I have had regarding spirits as well, and sort of creating a sacred space and working with spirits a little bit. And there have been a number of really excellent videos recently about spirits and things. I believe Witchy Bear did one, and there's been a couple, and I think there is something in the air right now with a lot of sort of spirit activity. I actually had a spirit on the end of the bed last night, and it was very physical, a very physical presence of someone sitting on the end of the bed. It was unusual to feel quite that physical, and it was a little unsettling. It can be quite often. I find the whole spirit thing a little unsettling because I had a lot of it happen to me when I was young, and I wasn't overly keen on it. So first of all, we'll talk about the smudge, which is Simply Starry Smudge Temple of the Dead, and it's sat right here. And so the little flower is just for decoration, obviously, and the main bulk of the smudge looks like this. Let's pop you back on. I hope you can see the lighting is a bit cray because we are in the middle of the December no light, and yesterday was even worse, so I couldn't even video yesterday at all. It was all very grey. So the Simply Starry Smudge Temple of the Dead is for honouring one's ancestors, funerary rites and rituals, honouring the fallen, honouring the forgotten, which I think is a important part of working with spirits. I've talked about this on a number of occasions, and if you've been with me for any length of time, then you know that I frequently engage in rituals of honouring the forgotten dead, and at Beltane and Samhain, although sometimes I go to autumn equinox rather than Samhain, I go and I honour the forgotten dead at the graveyard, and I will go to where there are graves that have been abandoned and fallen into disrepair and so on and so forth. And at Beltane I take rose petals, and at equinox, usually autumn equinox, I take apple slices, and it's a sort of offering to the forgotten dead. And I think it's a really important thing to do because there was so much life, and that they've fallen into, you know, forgotten, and their graves have been left unattended, and there's whether it's through, you know, the family's no longer around or whatever, I think there's a sadness to not being honoured in that respect, and there's a deep empty and sad feeling that comes with the idea of the forgotten. And so I regularly make it a part of my practice, as well as these big two occasions, to speak and honour the forgotten and the forgotten dead, and the things that they did in life that mattered to them, to their families, the great loves that they had, the great losses that they suffered. It kind of has this emptiness of eternity feel to it, to me, that you know, that someday we will all be forgotten in terms of who we are in this lifetime, in this existence. And I think there's a sadness to it. And as somebody who works quite closely with crone energies and death energies, the idea of death doesn't necessarily frighten me. I've said this before, but the idea of not being celebrated, of being forgotten, and not having led a life worth living kind of frightens me more than anything. And it's something that has come back to me recently, this thought process, and engaging with it again, and looking at who I want to be in terms of working with spirits in this manner to help me live, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to sort of make a little side note there. The Starry Smudge is also for karmic completion, including blood debt. Sometimes it is possible to have ick come down through family ties, through family lines, through bloodlines, the karmic debts and things that need to be cleared and resolved. Healing of old wounds, and that can be of the spirits or of our own that occur through mourning. So old wounds that fester and become poisonous on an emotional and spiritual level kind of have two real beginnings when it comes to working with the dead. The one, that the spirits are holding on to something and it's keeping them tethered here. It's unfinished business, for the most popular term, I guess. And then our own mourning, our own sadness, our own pain that we are clinging to, that has not eased with the passage of time. Now, I am very, 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 and that's a whole lot of verys and on purpose, set against this idea that mourning is not spiritual, because there has been this kind of influx of you mustn't be attached, and therefore mourning is kind of anti-spiritual, and that kind of makes me so friggin' angry. It's like every feeling and emotion you have, and the great love that you had for someone, and then missing them and mourning them, is perfectly natural, it's perfectly human, and it's perfectly spiritual. It's real, it's honest, it's just part of the life and death experience. And I really, really don't like this whole, oh well, you should be fine because you shouldn't be tethering yourself to the mortal coil and they'll be reborn anyway, so meh. And I don't think it comes from a good place at all, that kind of thing. I don't like it whatsoever. And then the smudge is also for releasing and cleansing of anything clinging where it ought not to be. That can be the releasing of entities and negative energies and entities that are sort of intermingled in a space, in order to cleanse out when one's having negative spirit activity happen into one's life, and one's being regularly disturbed by negative entities that have attached themselves to one's property. So I've been asked a few questions over an expanse of time. I don't know how long. We had a 3-day migraine this week, so I'm not with us. I'm not with it in terms of when people asked me with regards to spirits and things. So a lot of people tend to veer a little bit away from the idea of spirits and working with spirits and things because of the dangerous element to it. And I think there is something to be said for having done one's homework and having done research and having really, really, really read up about what one is doing before one starts engaging with spirits, because I think it's perfectly valid to say it could be a dangerous thing. And the reason that I say this is not only from when I was young, as a child into early teens, I was in a negative living environment, and I was in a negative living environment with a family of people who all had spirit ability, clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, the whole 9 yards, depending on which family member it was, every single one of them, and myself included. And that meant there was a lot of spirit activity. There was a lot of being drawn to that place. That house was negative and a place of abuse, so there was a lot of negative spiritual energy around that house. Then both my parents have had messed with spirits and stuff in their youth, and had some pretty horrifying tales of Ouija boards and things of that nature. As a result of their stories of Ouija boards, I never went near one as a teenager, because knowing the negative spiritual energies that were about in that house anyway, I didn't want to invite anything else in, and it's a well-known phrase that you shouldn't invite anything in that you don't know how to say goodbye to. And in terms of my spirit activities, working with spirits, working with the honoured dead, there have been a number of things that I have learnt to incorporate into my spiritual work. Whenever I go to graveyards, I tend to feel very strongly that there are gatekeepers and guardians of places of large spirit activity, such as graveyards, that are there by the perhaps divine will, or the will of the universe. And that has come to be something that I have come to expect in places such as graveyards. And interestingly enough, the graveyard that I used to frequent in the old property, there were cats there whenever I would go, and they would just appear. And cats are said to be half in, half out anyway. That's a Constantine quote, but I think it's very true, that they have eyes and they see far more than we do. And like anyone who's had cats and has seen them like looking around the room, and when spirits and things are around, then people know, you know, that cats have this ability. So whenever I used to go to that graveyard, cats would show up quite frequently, and it was my feeling that it was a physical embodiment of guardian that would walk around and keep an eye on me, and they would always be around me and keeping an eye on me. And I always leave offerings, not only for the spirits and the dead and so on and so forth, but for the gatekeepers before entering. And I would seek permission to enter a graveyard before entering it, and you tend to get a sense of intuition and feeling about it, and you can say it out loud, or you can say it in, you know, in your mind's eye, in your head, basically, like you're seeking permission to enter into this space of the sacred dead. So that's how it usually goes, that I am seeking to enter permission into this sacred space, this hall of the dead, this temple of the dead, which is where the idea, the energy for this smudge comes from, in order to pay homage to, give offerings to the dead. Now, some people will give blood offerings. I think that's perhaps only appropriate if you're working closely with that spirit, you've been working with that spirit a long time, or it's a relative, because, you know, giving your life blood to the dead is a very, very significant tie, and I think it's something that I'm not really going to talk about in this video, because it probably merits a whole video all onto itself, and it also kind of merits a deeper research than maybe a video sort of gives permission for. It's one of those things that ties back to what I was saying about you need to be sure what you're doing before you're doing it. You need to do the research. So there's the giving the offerings and the honouring energy of it. And then once leaving a graveyard, I would then, you know, go out. I would have left coins usually for the guardians at the gateway on entering, and then by leaving, and I kind of, when shutting gates or shutting the entranceway, I do kind of energetic gate shutting at the same time. So, you know, to then step back from this space, walk away from the space, and energetically cut myself from anything there. Make sure that you sort of do an energetic grounding and cleanse after leaving that space, to not allow anything to hook its energies into you and leave. Some people will take their smudge or what cleansing spray or whatever with them, so when they actually step out and they shut those doors, and then they can do the spritz. Probably the spritz is the easiest one, because if anyone's seeing you, like, oh, I'm just, you know, refreshing up, whereas the smudge stick is a little bit more, unless you have maybe a tobacco that you have smudging, you could do that maybe. But I don't smoke anything, so I would probably go with a spritz and just have a nice cleanse. And that's kind of leaving that space. Now, in terms of if you're working at home, then this smudge, this one here, is ideal for creating a temple in which to do an honouring of the dead, the spirits of the ancestors. And you're basically changing the energetic vibration within your sacred space in order to access realms of the void, the other, the beyond the veil. And you can invite spirits in, and there's kind of like a dual feeling about this. Some people are perfectly happy to kind of bring spirits right on in, particularly if it's family members or whatnot. I don't tend to like to do that, because I feel like if they're in the middle of a karmic process and then I'm interfering, I don't know, it kind of makes me feel a little bit like I might be interfering with the cosmic will. But then again, you know, if they're interested and they want to come, then they know where they're at in the cosmic plan. So maybe it's just me whittling too much and being way too Virgo about it. But I tend to sort of give my permission for those who love me and have bond with me and wish me no harm entrance if they wish it, but not kind of demand. Do you know what I mean? I tend to be a little bit more respectful, I think, and honorific perhaps than that. It kind of makes me feel kind of like the Japanese kind of connection to the spirits, and that kind of honorific mentality of trying to be completely and utterly respectful in one's working with ancestors and forces beyond one's complete comprehension. Very much the same way as when you're working with spirit guides, deity, and so on and so forth. There's a level of, this is beyond my current human form experience, so I'm not going to pretend that I understand everything. I'm not going to be that egotistical. I'm not going to be that full of it that I pretend that my little life, my little human life, is anything compared to the great beyond. So I'm going to be honorific in the way that I approach spirits, and so on and so forth. So one then creates the sacred space. One may have the dumb supper idea that you can use for Samhain. Now, if you're in sort of bringing forth an honouring of one's ancestor, you can do that more regularly than just at Samhain. I have aniseed balls for my grandma, for example, on hand regularly. That's what an aniseed ball is, they're sweets. Because that's something that was one of her favourites, and it's a memory that connects me to my grandmother and the spirit, and memories are a very powerful motivator, a very powerful connection. They are a visualisation of something that has occurred that you can't get back there, but you can remember it straight as day, very much like dreams, the messages of the unconscious, the ties to the other side. So things of that nature can be really wonderful when working with spirits, and I have been kind of asked that before, you know, like. And then you can, you know, pouring a drink for one's ancestors is something that I do a lot. It comes up quite a lot in Nordic paths. It comes up a fair bit in Celtic paths as well, kind of pouring the drink. And I've actually been outside, and I had this very, very clear visualization once where I took some whiskey and I poured it on the ground. Or I've done it with honey and milk in bulk before as well. And you kind of, you know, are pouring a drink to the ground, to the earth that has encapsulated the dead in order for their decomposition of their physical form and kind of their freeing of their soul form. So you're pouring the drink on the ground and honouring of the halls of the forgotten, the halls of the ancestors, and so on and so forth. And the last time I did that, I had a huge visualization of moving through this great big cathedral-like hall, and it was whoop, like that, and it was very, very, very clear. So it was an interesting experience last time I did that. And in terms of what do you do when you have finished your ritual and you don't want to be rude about it, but it's time to break the connection. Well, breaking the connection is very much like the graveyard idea, but then on a home level. So you put out your candles, you would say words of thanks and being honorific again, and ask that your ancestors return to the place in the karmic path where they came from, go back to the part where they're processing, where they're going through what they're doing, and creating a cleansing environment, a closing ritual in order to best sort of step back. So when you're engaging in that spiritual activity with spirits and you're kind of entering into that in-between space, you've burnt your smudge perhaps, you lit your candles, and then you kind of step back from it and you can extinguish the candles. A lot of people cover their photographs because that sort of severs the eye line connection to the physical representation, and sometimes even, you know, the fetish of the spirit, and it kind of covers it up and kind of cuts that connection on a very, very energetic but kind of very physical kind of way, kind of a visual thud. It's kind of like the closing of the gate that we talked about with regards to graveyards and the closing of the gates and so on and so forth. And then you kind of cleanse everything down, cleanse yourself down, maybe go have a full-on cleanse afterwards, a full-on ground as well. Most people will know how to cleanse and ground, and if you don't, there are videos already on this channel as well as many others on how to cleanse and ground, and you know what best works for you. Sometimes it can be good to make a lot of noise to finish. Sometimes it can be simple as you know, a big clapping of the hands, a drumming of the drum, a ringing of the bell. It's a very good clearing out, and it cleans out vibrations, and it separates and brings us back from that state of consciousness back into a very real physical state of consciousness, and kind of ends things. But you know, in terms of saying goodbye to the spirits, it can be as simple as being thankful, being honorific, and then like covering the photo or covering up what you were doing and stepping back, and now it is done, and now it is finished, and I give thanks. This is feels very Japanese in a way, but I give thanks to the spirits that honoured me with their presence, and I thank them for that and wish them well on their journey back to wherever it is they came from. I now close the gates, and you can visualize the closing of gates if you want. I think that might actually be really super helpful for a lot of people, just the visualization of closing off of one's self, one's energy, and stepping back from engaging with spirits. So I didn't want to go on too much because I know there've been a lot of really good videos lately, and I didn't want to step on anybody's information, but I had been asked to do the smudge and talk about the smudge and to answer a couple of questions about spirits, so I thought I would just offer up some experience and thoughts with this video as well. And that's it for this video.